Finally tonight, an extra special graduation day for a Massachusetts high school senior. After Tyler Solomon walked across the stage, the principal shook his hand. And eventually, Tyler noticed on the other end of the field his father, not seen him since January. U.S. Army Sergeant Damon Solomon is serving as a helicopter crew chief in Kosovo. He told his son he would not miss this special day for anything in the world. What a hero. That is it for Special Report tonight. I'm Shana Bream in Washington. I'll see you back here at 11 p.m. for Fox News at Night. The Story with Martha MacCallum out of New York is up next.
Thank you so much, Shannon. So Bill Clinton back on the hot seat.
With everything that's going on with the Me Too movement, how would you have approached the accusations differently?
Oh, boy. 20 years later in the Me Too world, what does Bill Clinton / Monica Lewinsky's Oval Office scandal look like now? A prominent senator and Clinton supporter who may run for president says he should have left office. But the former president became agitated and said no, he would do nothing differently.
I don't think it would be an issue because people would be using the facts instead of the imagined facts. If the facts were the same today, I wouldn't.
So he went on to say that the Me Too movement is, quote, long overdue. But critics are using it against him, he believes, in part because of President Trump.
I think partly because they're frustrated that they got all these serious allegations against the current occupant of the Oval Office, and his voters don't seem to care. I think I did the right thing. I defended the Constitution.
Then it got a little bit heated.
Through the lens of Me Too now, do you think differently or feel more responsibility?
No, I felt terrible then. Nobody believes that I got out of that for free. I left the White House $16 million in debt. You are giving one side and omitting facts.
Mr. President, I'm not trying to present a side.
You think President Kennedy should have resigned? Do you believe President Johnson should have resigned? Someone should ask you these questions because of the way you formulate the questions.
Very interesting questions on both sides there. Joining me now, David Bossie, former deputy campaign manager for President Trump, president of Citizens United, and a Fox News contributor who spent time as a lead investigator on congressional probes into the Clinton White House. And Lanny Davis, former special counsel to President Bill Clinton, who became well known for defending him during the Lewinsky scandal. He is also the author of the new book, The Unmaking of the President, 2016. Gentlemen, welcome. Great to have both of you with us tonight. You both have a lot of experience in this area and with these investigations. So, Lanny, let me begin with you. Does President Clinton need a new answer to that question now?
Well, I'm only going to give one comment on this topic. President Clinton apologized to the American people publicly. He apologized to Ms. Lewinsky and her family publicly, and he apologized to his wife and family. And by the time he left office, the American people's judgment was a 65% approval rating, the highest of any second-term president since polls were invented. That's about all I want to say about that topic.
Understood. David, let me get your response to this. It's also interesting that, the part where he says, I left the White House $16 million in debt. Don Trump Jr. Tweeted about that today. He said, did Bill Clinton just Me Too Monica Lewinsky? I almost have no words. Props for him always being ahead of the curve as the first male to publicly somehow claim victimhood from his actions against women. Ballsy, stupid, but ballsy, says Donald Trump Jr. Your thoughts, David?
Well, it's Bill Clinton. It's perfect, quintessential Bill Clinton. He's the victim here. He's the victim as the president of the United States who used his position of power over a 20-year-old intern. He's the victim after all these years. It's ridiculous. Bill Clinton only admitted the truth, which was that he had an affair with Monica Lewinsky only because the special prosecutor got a subpoena to draw his blood to force him to admit that he left physical evidence on a blue dress. That is how disgusting the facts were that we had to deal with in the 90s.
All right. Lanny, in terms of the broader investigation, at the time you fought very hard against independent counsel Ken Starr. You said that he was out of control, that there wasn't a scintilla of evidence against Bill Clinton in the Paula Jones case. And now Mark Penn, who also worked in the Clinton White House, he's very concerned about this. He says, I lived through it in 1998, and I think it's wrong, and I think it's what's happening again. Do you agree with Mark Penn?
I have no idea what Mark said. He's a good friend of mine, and I have no idea what quotes you're using.
Well, he's written about 5 or 6 columns that basically say that he thinks this investigation's out of control.
I just said I have no idea what Mark Penn said. He's a good friend of mine. This investigation has been going on for 1 year. Mm-hmm. And at 1 year into Watergate, President Nixon said, 1 year is enough, let's close the investigation. 1 year later, he resigned. I think Mr. Mueller is highly respected. Trey Gowdy, who I never thought I would quote David in praise after what he did on Benghazi. Trey Gowdy has told President Trump the following: if you're not guilty, then act like it. So let's let Mr. Mueller do his job.
Lanny, let me just correct you on one thing, and that is that this investigation will have been going on for 2 years this August. 2 years. The House and Senate started their investigations in August of 16. Let's not forget that. So yes, Mueller has been in office just over a year, but this investigation has been going on for 2 years, Lanny. No, Lanny, it's been going on for 2 years, and there's been no evidence whatsoever of any collusion. And that's what this investigation was about. It wasn't about, Paul Manafort and what he did 10 years ago, even though he's going to be convicted, it looks like, on other issues. Has nothing to do with the president and the campaign's collusion. That's the president's point. He didn't do anything wrong.
And also, Lanny, that was an interview that I did with Trey Gowdy. The part that doesn't get picked up a whole lot was that he said, I don't think President Trump did anything wrong. Right. He said, from everything we're seeing, there's no indication that he's done anything wrong.
I don't think is certainly fair, because we haven't seen the facts yet. My friend David Bossie, who has become a friend over the years. But you say he should be impeached. Wait a minute, Lanny. You just said he should be impeached. You say President Trump should be impeached. And then you just said in the last breath that you don't think you have all the facts. Who just said he should be impeached? I did not say that.
You have said that.
I have said he should be investigated. I don't know whether he should be impeached. My book, which thank you for mentioning, Martha, calls for an investigation. And my friend David Bossie, we have become friends over the years, forgot to mention that Ken Starr investigated Bill Clinton and Mrs. Clinton for 7 years and $60 million. And back then, David wasn't complaining.
Well, that's because Bill Clinton had one problem after another. It was one of the most corrupt administrations we ever saw. You look at how many independent counsels there were, Lanny. Look at how many different investigations there were, because there was corruption at every turn. This is an investigation, looking for some facts, but there's none there. And that's been the president's point the entire time.
Let's wait for the facts to come out. But by the way, David, the last independent counsel after Mr. Starr found no evidence of any criminal wrongdoing by either Mrs. Clinton. Despite all your efforts, it ended up in a big 0.
All right. Yeah. Let me ask you about James Comey, because I know that in your book, The Unmaking of the President, 2016, and by that you mean Hillary Clinton, because you believe that James Comey's actions toward the end of the campaign literally unmade her opportunity to be president. And you believe he lied. How so?
Well, this is where, again, David and I may actually agree on something. Comey lied when he said he was obligated to show the Congress that he was investigating the emails because of what he testified to, when all he actually said, and he knows that this is all he said, is, I will look at. When he finally looked at 6 days later, as we all know as a matter of history, he found nothing there, and on November 6, 2 days before the election, he told us there was nothing there. I also agree that he should have been fired, but by President Obama, because he violated Justice Department fundamental rules. I don't agree with President Trump's reason for firing, but he should have been fired.
All right. And just to be clear, at this point, you do not believe that there should be impeachment proceedings against President Trump?
Not without an investigation. I want to see what the facts are after a thorough investigation. I'd like it to be a bipartisan judgment rather than a partisan one, which is what occurred to Bill Clinton in 1998.
Understood.
And Martha, that's why we need Republicans to keep control of the House, because that's the only way there won't be impeachment. The Democrats have no policy positions. They have no agenda other than to impeach this president to end his remarkable agenda and his successes.
All right, guys.
Remarkable.
Thank you. I know you're not going to agree on that one.
Himself.
Lanny, thank you. David, thank you both. Great to have you here.
Thanks.
The Unmaking of the
Thank
President 2016 is Lanny Davis's new book. Coming up tonight, a senator stokes the flames of the immigration debate.
The reason the administration says that they're tearing these children away from their parents is not to treat them graciously, not to protect them, but instead to assault and inflict hurt.
That was one of his staffers who was shooting that whole thing. He got 1 million hits on the internet today for that. But what's the real story behind Senator Jeff Merkley's viral visit to immigration facilities that are housing illegal minors? Ben Shapiro says it's ridiculous. He'll be here with that argument in a moment. Also, Judge Andrew Napolitano unleashes on the Trump legal team next.
The president of the United States pardoning himself would just be unthinkable, and it would lead to probably an immediate impeachment.
That just came in. President Trump was supposed to welcome the Super Bowl 52 champions Philadelphia Eagles to the South Lawn of the White House. It's a tradition, happens every year, but it appears that it is not going to be happening this week. The president just released this statement moments ago, saying this, in part: the Philadelphia Eagles are unable to come to the White House with their full team to be celebrated tomorrow. They disagree with their president, the president writes, because he insists that they proudly stand for the national anthem, hand on heart, in honor of the great men and women of our military and the people of our country. So no big moment for the Eagles. I won't be crying too much over that one, as you know, but it turns out that the Eagles will not be. Here's another reason, you know. But anyway, we digress. So there's that. If we get any more, we'll let you know. And breaking tonight, a confidential new memo just revealed that President Trump's lawyers sent to special counsel Robert Mueller back in January. Remember, this is the old legal team that sent this. This is Rudy Giuliani made the Sunday show rounds saying that the president could pardon himself, but that he wouldn't. Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry live at the White House with the story for us tonight. Hi, Ed.
Martha, great to see you. President Trump really raising the stakes tonight by declaring the special counsel's probe is, in his words, unconstitutional, and that he has the power to pardon himself if he wants, suggesting there may be major clashes ahead, not just with Robert Mueller, but maybe the Congress and the Supreme Court as well. The president made clear he does not expect to pardon himself because he says he's done nothing wrong, closely matching the message this weekend of his lead attorney, Rudy Giuliani, who raised the specter of this, but then added it was unthinkable the president would do it because it would likely lead to impeachment. Now, key Trump advisors tell me an important part of what Giuliani is doing with the president's blessing is signaling to Mueller there's still a chance, a small chance, of a one-on-one interview, but only if questions are severely limited. And this is a warning shot that if the special counsel wants to instead issue a subpoena to compel the president to testify, he's ready for a battle in court. And I can tell you the president offered a combative tone as he did a phone call just a short time ago with the Minnesota Republican Party celebrating the accomplishments of his first 500 days in office. Listen.
We have a lot of people against us. We have that phony Russian witch hunt, which is finally becoming discredited, because that's what it is. It's a discredited disgrace. It's not even constitutional in a lot of people's opinion, in my opinion, too.
Now, as you noted, this battle, of course, comes in the context of an extraordinary 20-page memo sent to the special counsel back in January by two of the president's personal attorneys at the time, John Dowd, who's now out, Jay Sekulow, who's still in, asserting the president cannot really obstruct justice because he has the power to shut the investigation down whenever he wants. The memo also states the president himself dictated a statement that turned out to be misleading about his son Donald Trump Jr.'s 2016 meeting at Trump Tower with Russia. That conflicts with Sarah Sanders and what Jay Sekulow last year said, minimizing the president's role in drafting that statement. Yet I can tell you a former deputy to independent counsel Kenneth Starr told Fox the memo is helpful to the president. Watch.
It's the leaking of the letter, which I absolutely believe had to have come from the camp of the president, that I think it's such a brilliant maneuver because it shows a number of things. First, it shows that the Mueller team's view of obstruction of justice is frighteningly broad.
He certainly didn't dictate, but, you know, he, like I said, he weighed in, offered suggestion like any father would do.
Now, that was last year. Today at the podium, Sarah Sanders again said the president did not dictate that statement, even though his own legal team in January said he did dictate the statement, Martha.
Okay, Ed, thank you very much for the update from the White House tonight. So Judge Andrew Napolitano joins us now, Fox News senior judicial analyst. Judge, what do you think?
I think that the letter was a disgrace and harmful.
The January memo.
The January memo. I don't know how it got out. I don't know why the White House would have leaked it, as has been suggested, because it shows really a sophomoric view of the law. They cited the wrong statute, and they interpreted the wrong opinion. They interpreted an appeals court opinion rather than the Supreme Court. They're basically saying two things. The president can't commit obstruction of justice because he can order anybody prosecuted, he can stop any prosecution, he can fire anybody he wants. He can, but if he does so for a corrupt purpose, that would be the definition of obstruction of justice. They forgot that part. Second argument they make is that he can interfere with an FBI investigation. That's not obstruction of justice. They forgot that the statute they cited was amended in 2002, 16 years ago, to say that the interference with an FBI investigation intended to produce evidence is obstruction.
The lawyers for the president of the United States. I mean, you would think that he would have a really good legal team. He doesn't have this legal team anymore, but now he has Rudy Giuliani and Jay Sekulow.
It is difficult for me to criticize them because I know them all personally and have interacted with many of them, Jay here and the others in other environments. But they are not serving him well when they needlessly show their cards, when they make arguments like he can impeach himself. Why even raise that issue? And Rudy Giuliani, who was
he could pardon himself.
Correct. A brilliant prosecutor, suggesting that the president could have ordered James Comey to be shot in the Oval Office and that he could not be prosecuted for that. That is absurd and is a violation of the law. He could be arrested, charged, indicted, released, tried after he leaves the White House, but no way would any law enforcement agency allow a murder or an attempted murder to go uncharged because the person behind it was the president.
What's your recommendation? What's your recommendation? I mean, should he fire Rudy Giuliani for that?
I don't know, because they have a relationship with which I'm unfamiliar. Perhaps the president wants Rudy causing this chaos, but he is causing chaos, and he's causing people like you and me and our colleagues here and elsewhere to be talking about these absurd, off-the-wall things like, can the president pardon himself? Why would the president want anybody discussing that?
It's the 500th day of the presidency, and the president tweeted one tweet about that, talking about, how well he feels that he's got so much accomplished. But he did, probably 9 or 10 over the weekend about all of this.
The president has much of which to be proud on his 500th day in office. But whether or not he should pardon himself is not among them. And most respectfully, if Bob Mueller's office is unconstitutional, why did you sanction the Russians that he indicted? And why are your lawyers interacting with an unconstitutional entity? I don't know what his answer would be.
Good argument. Judge, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Good to see you tonight, as always.
It's always a pleasure. Happy Monday.
Thank you.
You just don't like the Eagles because they beat the Patriots.
Exactly. Is that a problem? I mean, that's not a problem.
God love your honesty.
I have other reasons, but we'll
God love your honesty.
Thank you very much. All right, so joining me now, Jonathan Swan, national political reporter for Axios. Jonathan, great to have you here tonight. Thanks for being here. One of the issues that the judge and I didn't get to is this issue of the dictation by the president of the response to Donald Jr.'s June 16th meeting at Trump Tower. Why is it problematic that he would have been involved in that?
Well, it was problematic in the first instance because the statement was misleading, and
how was it misleading?
That they said it was about Russian adoption, the meeting that Don Jr. had with these Russians, and obviously that was a topic. That was a pretext.
No, I understood, but wasn't that something that the Russian lawyer and that group had been lobbying for and working on for a long time?
No question, but as the Trump team would now acknowledge, the meeting also included some other fairly relevant things, including emails to set it up, which Don Jr. agreed with, saying that they had dirt on Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. So, please come in. I love it.
I think it's all out
but is it possible? I've just always been curious about this. Is why I'm asking this, because it's possible that that's what they lured him with. And they wanted to talk to him about the other thing, and they didn't really have any dirt. But they wanted to get him in the room, and they figured that would work. And the president said, you know, who wouldn't take that meeting in today's politics?
So, but to your question, I don't know that it's legally problematic. I mean, it's not illegal to lie to the news media. It's not illegal to lie to the New York Times. And the president, of course, hasn't spoken to Bob Mueller. And as Rudy Giuliani continually reminds us, one of the reasons he hasn't spoken to Bob Mueller, one of the reasons his legal team has been restraining that, is because they don't want him to be perjure himself. And so this is, Rudy Giuliani has literally said that out loud. He said that, you know, these shifting explanations and misleading statements, this is why we don't want the president being interviewed by Bob Mueller.
All right, so what's your sense at the White House right now about how they feel about all of this? Because today, you know, all of the conversation, as I just said, it's the 500th day in office, but all the conversation is about these comments over the weekend. The president saying that he could pardon himself if he wanted to, that the investigation itself is unconstitutional. As far as message structuring goes, this is a failure.
So there's like two parts to this thing. Whenever I read, you know, this is the mood in the White House about the Russian investigation, it's nonsense. They don't talk about it. It's like the one thing, Russia is the one word nobody in the West Wing talks about. They don't have meetings about it. In fact, if there's any mention of it, people try and leave the room. It's like the word that no one wants anything to do with. And that being said, there is this dynamic, particularly in the White House press shop and comms team, where they're watching the show like the rest of us. They have no earthly idea what Rudy Giuliani is going to say, you know, to whoever in the next minute or on TV tonight. It is this completely separate operation. And honestly, they view it as a circus, a lot of them. They see this, they don't really know what's going on, they don't know what he's going to say. They assume that there is a coordination between Rudy Giuliani and the president, but I think they're very happy to be out of it and to have nothing to do with it and leave it to those guys. And the more we can just say, as spokespeople for the White House, you know, I defer to the president's outside counsel, that's the magic sentence for all of them.
And, you know, you could sense the frustration in the briefing room today. Sarah Huckabee Sanders basically said, look, there's a Chinese wall. You know, we're not the legal team. If you have questions for them, you have to go see, you have to ask them. And we all know that the legal team does leak from time to time, so you can get answers from the legal team if you push hard enough. But that's a frustration, obviously, for the press corps.
It's a frustration for the press team. And, you know, I remember when John Dowd, who wrote that memo you talked about, who was one of the authors of it, President's former lawyer, I remember when he was giving interviews and I was, you know, talking to senior people in the White House press shop, and they were just sort of tearing their hair out. They had no idea some of this stuff was coming. They had to respond to it. So it's never been coordinated in any way, shape or form.
Jonathan, thank you. Great to see you tonight. Jonathan Swan in Washington. Great to have you. So still to come tonight, voting across the country tomorrow as the civil war over California plays out in electoral politics in that state. We're going to break down what you need to watch there and in the 7 other states for tomorrow night. Plus, a senator crying foul after police confront him for trying to get into a detention center where they are holding illegal minors who have been separated from their parents. Bad situation, to be sure. But Ben Shapiro says that was a publicity stunt. He's here with his take after the break.
I want to know if they are having second thoughts about being partners in a process of ripping children away from their families under this new policy.
Then we're going to prosecute you. And that child will be separated from you probably as required by law. If you don't want your child to be separated, then don't bring them across the border illegally.
So that was Attorney General Jeff Sessions last month announcing a new Trump administration policy to refer every person caught crossing the border illegally for federal prosecution. And as a result of that action, Senator Jeff Merkley, a Democrat from Oregon, decided to go to the Texas detention center over the weekend that's holding some of these illegal minors and try to prove just how bad the situation really is. And of course, he took long cameras to document his experience, despite the fact that he had been told in advance that he would not be admitted to that facility. Here's what happened.
The reason that I came was this new policy that the Attorney General has in place of families that are awaiting for the adjudication of their application for asylum here in the U.S. And the children are being separated. I think it's important for you all to be aware that it's been in the press all over the country that the children who were previously kept with their families, under a new policy just implemented by the Attorney General, are being separated from their families and warehoused here. Well, we're here. Supervisor's here. If he wants to see his property, he can ask, but he hasn't asked yet.
Okay. Do you guys mind?
Okay. I don't mind at all.
So that's what happened. It went viral, as I said. It's all over the internet. Here now, Ben Shapiro, editor-in-chief of DailyWire.com. Ben, good to see you, as always. Thanks for being on the show tonight. Your reaction, you said this is a ridiculous stunt. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, it's a ridiculous stunt in the sense that if Congress wants to change the law right now to allow illegal immigrant detainees to stay with their children, they could theoretically do that. The Democrats are not moving to do that. Here is the real issue. The issue is that under American law, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has said this. When illegal immigrants enter the country with illegal immigrant children, those children are not allowed to be kept in custody longer than 20 days. They must be referred out of the system to some sort of other guardian figure. Well, what that means is that these kids are going to be, by law, separated from their parents when their legal immigrant parents cross the border. Democrats' response to this has been to say that Trump is the one who is forcibly separating these kids from their parents. But in reality, what Democrats mean by that is that what they would like to see is a mass attempt by the Trump administration not to actually enforce immigration law at all. So their answer is, instead of just releasing these kids and keeping the parents, let's release everybody. Let's release the kids. Let's release the parents. Let's release everybody. When in reality, if you actually want to enforce immigration law and you want to keep the kids with their parents, you theoretically could actually make a legal fix for that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, because if you do go through the congressional process and you try to change this, you're going to sort of run headlong into the entire issue of immigration reform in this country and say, well, why are we doing this, right? How is this working? Why are we separating these children? Well, we're separating the children because they're coming across. In some cases, they don't know whether or not the children are actually the children of the parents or whether or not they're being trafficked into the country. There are a lot of concerns about these families. In many cases, they just don't know, and they don't have paperwork, and in some cases, they can't communicate that properly. So in some situations, these kids are in danger, and it's the worst possible thing to see them, in these holding centers. But, they, in some ways, I mean, do you believe it's true that they brought it on themselves?
Well, I mean, I don't think that the kids brought it on themselves, obviously,
no, I mean,
but I think that when the parents come across the border knowing what the status of the law is, I mean, if the status of the law is what the status of the law is, then I'm not sure why that changes based on the President of the United States and his administration enforcing the law. Again, I would like to see these kids stay with the parents, but the easiest way to do that is to change the law to allow the kids to stay with the parents, or for the parents not to come illegally in the first place. Democrats like Merkley are insisting the best way to fix the law is to just not enforce it at all. Just anyone who comes across the border with a kid, we let go straight into society. This is why Merkley's in favor of sanctuary cities. This is why he's been in favor of catch and release policies that allow illegal immigrant parents to just be released and then they never show up for the court date. If you're going to enforce immigration law, under the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling, you must take the kids away from the parents. That's not the fault of a bunch of conservatives. That's the fault of a bunch of people on the left who sit on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and are beloved by Democrats the world over.
Yeah, we've been talking about, a number of the legal issues that came up over the weekend with the president, with the, ability to pardon yourself, all of that, whether it's unconstitutional, the Mueller investigation overall. And, sort of lost in that little shuffle was one tweet from the president saying, oh, it's day 500 of my presidency. And that really could have been, sort of the marquee moment of the day. But, because of all these other tweets, we're not necessarily talking about it. But I'm curious what you think on day 500. How do you think he's doing?
I mean, he's governed more conservatively than I certainly could have imagined. He's the most conservative president of my lifetime through his first 500 days. So in terms of policy, I'm extraordinarily happy with President Trump. In terms of his rhetoric, I mean, you said what you said about the Twitter. I mean, the Twitter is what the Twitter is, and President Trump's rhetoric is what President Trump's rhetoric is. I think we have a lot of areas to be grateful for in terms of policy. I wish the president could keep his rhetorical habits a little bit more under control, and then we could all appreciate the winning.
And the Philadelphia Eagles decided not to go to the White House. And the president says, they don't like my policy. What do you think about that?
Well, the president has a habit of saying to people, well, you can't quit, you're fired. So I'm not particularly shocked by the president's response to all of this. I've never been a fan of sports teams visiting the White House. It just seems like celebrity culture at its finest. I hate celebrity culture in general. I don't like Kim Kardashian at the White House. I don't like the Eagles at the White House. I don't like anybody who is famous for the sake of being famous at the White House. It seems to me that this is, again, the people's house where policy should be getting done, not a bunch of photo ops, whether it's Obama doing it or Bush doing it or President Trump doing it.
All right. Well, I'm just being told that Trump disinvited them. So maybe he's starting to feel the same way about celebrity culture at the White House. Ben, always good to see you. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thanks a lot.
So tomorrow, 8 states will vote in primaries that could make or break things for President Trump's entire agenda. We're going to take a look at the races that you're going to want to be watching tomorrow night and the plan for victory for both sides next. Plus, the officer accused of being a coward cop, failing to stop the Parkland school gunman, is now speaking out for the first time to defend his actions.
We have possible, could be firecrackers. I think we got shots fired. Possible shots fired. 1,200 buildings.
Now, voters are going to start heading to the polls in 8 states in the United States of America, including California, which political watchers believe could determine the control of the House come November, because there's so many interesting races going on in California. So under the state's rules, the top 2 candidates advance to the general election regardless of party, meaning both Democrats and Republicans could be shut out of key contests. Kayleigh McEnany is the RNC spokesperson. Kayleigh, good to see you tonight. There is so much going on in all of these states across the country. California is fascinating. Tell me what you're watching there.
You're right, Martha. It's a fascinating state to look at because, as you mentioned, this is a top 2 vote-getter system. So in 3 congressional districts, there are so many Democratic candidates vying to become their nominee or to advance in that top 2 vote-getter round that basically they could be shut out, and we could see Republicans who have a smaller field advance. And Martha, what is so astonishing to me is that the Democratic Party is getting involved in bullying some of their candidates out of the race and using really harsh tactics. And I had to fact-check this with our regional team because I couldn't believe it when I read it, that you have one Democratic candidate in the 48th district saying party officials came to me and said I was too brown to win here and had to leave the race. It's astonishing that they're sinking to that level.
Who is that?
That was Congressman Omar Siddiqui. Omar Siddiqui, a former FBI advisor who is alleging this against Democratic Party officials in the 48th district. It's incredible.
I mean, what is he doing about that? I mean, is he fighting that? That's unbelievable.
Yeah, he's been saying it loudly. It's only been picked up by one source, the Washington Examiner, but I've confirmed it with the RNC that he is saying Democratic Party officials have told him this, but no one is covering it. They're using race baiting and tactics like this to bully out candidates. It's astonishing.
It is astonishing. And what about Representative Ed Royce's seat, which is open? That one's being called the weirdest race in the country. Why?
Oh, it's very weird, especially because you have Democrats that are fighting so intensely that the state party chairman, the Democratic state party chairman, convened them at an Italian restaurant. And what was described as a Godfather-like dinner said, we all need to come together and make peace because we're hurting ourselves. So this is how vicious it's gotten. They're having to convene at Italian restaurants and make peace.
Well, we hope it doesn't turn out like The Godfather. In terms of the money that's being spent by the Democrats, I mean, they're in danger of going bust in California. They've dumped so much money into this, right?
That's right. There are 10 seats that they've spent a combined $30 million. We've spent just a fraction of that. And here's the thing, and this is Politico reporting. It's true. We can confirm this at the RNC, that our candidates are equipped with millions of dollars, most of them, when they come out of these races. But to avoid this top 2 vote-getter system, Democrats are wasting all their money, and some of their candidates are next to broke. So they've got a lot of trouble. And the DNC is broke, by the way, too.
So what about the RNC in California in terms of holding on to some of those Republican seats? What's your outlook?
Well, one of the things we're really looking at is this sanctuary state law. It's really taken California by storm. You see more than a dozen districts rising up against the state government saying this is not something we want to tolerate. This is going to be a key hot button issue for us. We've already seen Kevin De Leon. He's challenging Dianne Feinstein. He's fallen in the polls. He's the author of the sanctuary state legislation, and we think that that's hurting him, and his fall in the polls is illustrative of what's happening statewide.
Going to be fascinating. What about Montana? Because we all remember the president kind of going after Senator Jon Tester there during the whole Ronnie Jackson thing, the White House doctor, when they wanted him to be the head of the VA. He really impugned his character, and they had a battle over that, and the president was tweeting about it, as everybody remembers. What's going on there?
Well, it's interesting because Jon Tester, it's funny, he's voted against nearly all of President Trump's policies. Let out his first campaign ad, Martha. His first campaign ad says, I can put on 2 hands the number of bills that I got President Trump to sign. He wasn't with President Trump on tax cuts, wasn't with President Trump on keeping the government open or any of his other key legislation. Nevertheless, he's touting his record with Donald Trump, and now he has a Green Party challenge, and he's fighting that in court. So he's in a lot of trouble, Jon Tester.
Fascinating to watch. Kayleigh, thank you very much. We'll be watching tomorrow night.
Thanks, Martha.
Okay, so coming up here, the police officer who was accused of being a coward during the Parkland massacre is now opening up. He's telling his side of the story, but not everyone's buying it. Jeff Bell, president of the Broward County Sheriff's Union, joins me next.
In the perfect world, I would have said, oh, yeah, I know there was a shooter in there. Let me go to the third floor, find this person.
This quote, the bottom line, I was there to protect, and I lost 17. That is what the disgraced former school resource officer at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School is now saying, nearly 4 months after a gunman murdered 17 people inside that Florida school. Sheriff's Deputy Scott Peterson breaks his silence and questions what he could have done to save lives despite not going into the building to try to find and confront the shooter. Trace Gallagher live in our West Coast newsroom with the backstory tonight. Trace.
Martha, former Broward County Deputy Scott Peterson now says he did what he was trained to do, called in the shooting, locked down the school, cleared the kids out of the courtyard. Peterson says surveillance video and call logs support his story, but the video and the call logs are originally what prompted the sheriff to label him a coward. We know at 2:21 on the afternoon of February 14th, Deputy Peterson was in his office when a call came in of a possible firecracker. Seconds later, a fire alarm went off and Peterson ran toward the 1200 building until a security guard in a golf cart offered him a ride. When Peterson got off the cart, he heard 2 loud bangs. He claims he didn't know where they came from, so he took up a tactical position against the wall of a building near 1200. And at 12:23, he made the first police radio call. Watch.
We have possible, could be firecrackers. I think we got shots fired. Possible shots fired. 1200 building.
1200. In the next 54 seconds, Peterson made 2 more calls where he again identified shots being fired in the 1200 building. But now he maintains that while he said 1200, he never pinpointed the location, never saw the shooter, and stayed against the wall so he wasn't exposed. But according to police surveillance video that has not been released, it does show the attacker discarding his weapon in the stairwell of 1200 and then blending in with other students as they fled the building. Here's Peterson's radio call a full 7 minutes after the report of a firecracker. Listen.
Do not approach the 12 or 1300 buildings. Stay at least 500 feet away at this point.
Everybody stay away, but at that point, the victims were all down and the shooter was gone. Here's Scott Peterson now on NBC. Watch.
You know, if I would have, at the point, if I would have known, I mean, knowing what I know today, I would have been in that building in a heartbeat. I mean, like I said, it was my kids. I mean, it's just I didn't know. And I mean, I rack my brain. I go, why?
Yet even in hindsight, the sheriff and the police union both agree Peterson should have gone in, addressed the killer, and killed the killer. Martha.
Unbelievable. Trace, thank you very much. Here with more tonight, Broward Sheriff's Office Deputies Association President Jeff Bell. Jeff, what goes through your mind when you listen to this man who has now broken his silence and is defending himself?
It's shameful to listen to the words that he's speaking today. Deputy Peterson, in his 28 out of 32-year law enforcement career, has spent that as a school resource deputy. And I think what he's forgotten is how to tell the truth as he's sitting there being a counselor inside of a school instead of a law enforcement officer. Because what he forgets is that facts have to match the story that's being told. And the story that Deputy Peterson is telling does not match the facts that we can clearly see through the dispatch call logs and through the video. Deputy Peterson was right there a minute after the shooting started and then continued to listen to those shots go on for another 5 minutes before he ever took action. And the first tactical bit of information that he put out on the radio was to tell deputies to stay away 500 feet, which is against all protocol in the sheriff's office. But that also paints a bigger picture of what's going on in the sheriff's office, that things need to be fixed from a much higher level. And the deputies that are working the ground are just following what they're being told to do from a higher level.
Yeah, I mean, it's infuriating. This is Andrew Pollack, who lost his daughter, Meadow. He was on with us on Friday night. Watch.
The one deputy that worked at the school didn't go in, so he hid behind the wall, and they thought that there still was an active shooter in there because he was still hiding behind the wall, the deputy that was at the building at the time. So, you know, the paramedics, they had their work cut out for them that day because the sheriff at the school didn't do his job.
We were talking about the fact that the paramedics were also told they could not go into the building. And no doubt there were children who had been wounded at that point that really could have used that paramedic help. Who's been held accountable in the sheriff's office so far, and in what way?
Well, Martha, that's what I was trying to say before about the bigger problem here at the sheriff's office, is that nobody has been held accountable. You have the district captain of Parkland, Jan Jordan, who took 11 minutes to get to that scene and had no ability to take a command presence at that crime scene and actually get the resources inside that were needed. Fire Chief McDowley out of Coral Springs went on the record and stated 6 times he asked Captain Jordan for permission to get fire rescue units and law enforcement units into that school as rescue task force units, as we're trained to do, to help save people and save lives. And 6 times he was denied to allow those rescue task force to get inside. So it shows the incompetence of the district captain, and those people are being placed in by the sheriff himself as political appointees and favoritism and cronyism.
Jeff, thank you. We're going to stay on this story. We're going to keep asking the questions until something happens. Thank you very much. We'll be right back.
Thank you.